Welcome to EstateScope, the channel where we expose the hidden forces shaping today's real estate markets. From climate risk to insurance pullouts to overlooked government policies, we break down what's really behind the headlines and what it means for your investments, your home, and your future. If you're into real estate with a twist of investigative reporting, hit like, tap subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you never miss a story that could impact where you live, what you buy, or how you build. Now, let's get into what might be one of the most overlooked real estate catastrophes of the decade. It started like any other cold Alaskan October. The wind had picked up, the tides had grown more aggressive, and residents along Alaska's western coast watched the skies like they always do, cautious but unfazed. These were communities built on resilience. But then the water didn't stop. The tides didn't just rise. They surged. Surged like nothing seen in decades. And just like that, homes were underwater. Roads disappeared. And for more than 2,000 Alaskans, life as they knew it was gone. Kipnuk, a quiet village of just over 700 people, saw 90% of its homes destroyed. Entire families had to be airlifted. Kwigilingok lost 1/3 of its housing. Others fled through frigid waters with only the clothes on their backs. This wasn't just a bad storm. This was the spark that lit a real estate time bomb. One that's been ticking beneath the surface of American housing for years. In Kipnuk alone, over 100 homes, representing nearly the entire local housing stock, have been wiped from the market. With no insurance, no resale path, and no lenders willing to step in, these properties went from assets to liabilities overnight. What happened in Alaska might just be a preview of what's coming to vulnerable real estate markets across the country. Halong's wrath. What really happened? On October 12, 2025, the remnants of Typhoon Halong slammed into Alaska's Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. The storm had already passed Japan and been downgraded. But fueled by unusually warm Pacific waters, it re-intensified as it approached Alaska's coast. Hurricane-force winds pushed a wall of water 6.6 feet higher than the highest tides ever recorded in the region. That broke a record that had stood since 2000. In towns like Kipnuk and Kwigilingok, people were quite literally swimming for their lives. More than 50 people were rescued. One woman died. 2 more were reported missing. Over 1,400 Alaskans were evacuated. Hundreds more were left sheltering in schools, sports arenas, or anywhere above water. But it wasn't just wind and water. It was the timing. The storm hit as Alaska prepared for winter. Rebuilding couldn't start. Supplies couldn't come in. And with no road access, the only way to help was by air. And even the runways were flooded. To understand why this storm was so devastating, you have to understand the land. Western Alaska is flat, barely above sea level. Some towns sit less than 10 feet above the highest tides. Add melting permafrost, rising seas, and disappearing ice barriers. And the coastline has been quietly eroding for decades. Kipnuk alone has had more than 30 flood events since 1979. In 2024, Alaska's Department of Natural Resources issued a full risk assessment. It predicted exactly this, that Kipnuk was dangerously exposed to future flooding. But flood prevention work never started. In fact, a $20 million grant to build defenses was rescinded by the EPA in May 2025. And then, just a few months later, Halong hit. The storm's exact path wasn't predicted until it was too late. Why? Experts point to a quiet but serious issue: reduced weather balloon launches. In 2025, federal budget cuts reduced upper air weather observations across Alaska. That included places like Nome and Kotzebue, areas directly in Halong's path. Without enough balloon data, storm models became less accurate. That's why evacuations didn't come in time. That's why so many families were caught off guard. It wasn't just nature. It was neglect. Real estate in ruin. a new kind of housing crisis. Now here's where it gets even more serious. Once a home is flooded, especially in rural Alaska, it's not just damaged, it's done. You can't call a contractor. You can't drive to a hardware store. Every piece of lumber, every pipe, even the nails have to come in by plane or barge. Rebuilding one home here can cost 5 to 10 times what it would in the lower 48. And insurance. Most of these homes weren't insured. Why? Because traditional flood insurance through FEMA's NFIP often doesn't cover remote tribal lands. And private insurers have long avoided these high-risk areas. No insurance equals no payouts equals no rebuilds. That means the land itself becomes valueless. If you can't insure it, finance it, or rebuild it, it's no longer real estate. It's just risk. This isn't just about individual homes. It's a market shift. Real estate here has effectively been delisted from the financial system, and for investors, that's a massive red flag. FEMA, the governor, and the political chessboard Governor Mike Dunleavy didn't wait long. Within days of the disaster, he requested a federal major disaster declaration. His message to the public was clear. Every effort will be made to help those hit by this storm. Help is on the way. President Trump responded publicly during a press conference, stating, "We're going to support Alaska. We're looking at the request right now, and we'll make sure the state has what it needs behind the scenes." Alaska's congressional delegation, Senators Lisa Murkowski, Dan Sullivan, and Representative Nick Begich, sent a letter to the White House urging immediate approval. But here's the issue. The process isn't built for speed, and it's not built for homeowners. FEMA's assistance is broken into two major categories. Public assistance, PA, covers infrastructure like roads, schools, water systems, airports, and emergency response costs. Individual assistance, IA, covers personal losses like damage to homes or vehicles, but with strict limits and eligibility. Even when IA is activated, it's capped. Families may receive a few $1,000s, barely enough to replace a roof, let alone rebuild a flooded house in a remote village. And in many cases, FEMA's IA only applies to primary residences with formal legal ownership and clear title. That leaves out homes built informally on tribal land, generational housing with shared ownership, homes with no mortgage, and no insurance. So what happens when FEMA steps in, but only for roads and not for roofs? The step-by-step fallout. Step 1. FEMA assesses the damage and releases PA for rebuilding community infrastructure, boardwalks, power lines, roads, water treatment systems. Step 2. IA is activated, but families begin to realize it doesn't cover full rebuilds, or they don't qualify at all. Step 3. Insurance doesn't fill the gap, because many didn't have it or can't get it. Step 4. No money equals no repairs. Homes sit ruined. Step 5. The longer the property sits vacant, the more it deteriorates, lowering land value and driving down local real estate. Governor Dunleavy's office has been pushing for expanded FEMA flexibility and additional housing grants. But so far, no standalone federal housing relief has been approved. This isn't just bureaucracy. It's a reflection of FEMA's original design, which was built to respond to major infrastructure damage, not widespread private housing collapse. Alaska's case exposes this flaw. In small, roadless communities, losing homes is losing infrastructure. There's no real divide. And that disconnect could have long-term real estate consequences. Entire towns may become unlivable, not because of physical damage, but because no one steps up to restore private homes. So the question becomes, if your home is wiped out, and neither your insurance, your state, nor your federal government will rebuild it, what is that home worth now? The answer? Nothing. The federal failures behind the crisis. This wasn't a fluke. The storm exposed every weak point in our system. No updated flood insurance policies. No permanent infrastructure protections. No real-time forecasting, no housing backup plan. It also highlighted a federal hypocrisy. These communities are part of the U.S., but they're treated like afterthoughts. If a storm like Halong hit New Jersey, the response would have been instant. The money guaranteed. But in Alaska's native towns, people are still waiting, still sheltering, still forgotten. Climate change and the coming storms meteorologists have confirmed. The Pacific Ocean was unusually warm this year. Warm oceans equals stronger storms. Just like Halong, just like Merbok in 2022, just like the ones still to come. Alaska is the front line of climate risk, and it's happening faster than anywhere else in the U.S. And it's not just Alaska. Coastal Louisiana, inland Florida, the Carolinas, even parts of California are starting to see insurance pullouts and climate-driven housing shifts. If the system doesn't adapt, if insurance, infrastructure, and policy stay stuck, we're going to see value collapse in vulnerable areas nationwide. What investors should be watching. This disaster isn't just a warning for residents. It's a wake-up call for property owners, developers, and investors. Across the country, location risk is becoming the #1 driver of property value. Can you insure it? Can you rebuild it? Will lenders back it? Will zoning laws allow reconstruction? Alaska shows us what happens when the answer to all of those is no. The result? Instant depreciation. If Kipnuk was a test case, then coastal investors should be thinking hard about flood maps, FEMA zone shifts, and insurance carrier exits. What this means for the U.S. housing market Alaska may feel far away, but what happened here matters everywhere. Because Halong wasn't just a storm. It was a stress test for American real estate, and it failed. Kipnuk's homes may be gone, but the warning signs they leave behind are permanent. If a Category 1 strength storm can wipe out 90% of homes in a village, what happens when something similar hits a place with real density, like Tampa, Sacramento, or parts of New York's Hudson Valley? We're not just dealing with disasters. We're looking at the emergence of stranded housing assets, properties that still exist on paper, but are no longer insurable, financeable, or sellable. In other words, homes that no longer hold real-world value. For decades, American real estate has been built on two assumptions: that land holds long-term value and that homes are safe bets. But those assumptions were forged in an era of stable weather, affordable insurance, and predictable zoning. That era is ending. Alaska is the clearest example yet of how external forces, once unthinkable in real estate math, are now determining whether a property can survive. And it's already happening across the U.S. In Florida, Redfin reported some high-risk flood zone zip codes saw home values fall 15 to 20% year over year. Nationally, the average cost of homeowners insurance has increased over 21% since 2021, with even bigger jumps in wildfire and flood-prone states like California, Texas, and Louisiana. Lenders and underwriters are beginning to factor climate exposure into home valuations, quietly adjusting loan-to-value ratios or requiring special coverage that many homeowners can't afford. This shift doesn't just affect buyers and sellers. It affects the entire real estate ecosystem. Appraisers are questioning comps in high-risk zones. Developers are reconsidering projects. Insurers are pulling out. Municipalities are being left with decaying infrastructure and shrinking tax bases. We're entering a new era, one where location risk outweighs curb appeal. Flood maps, elevation data, and infrastructure resilience may soon matter more than mortgage rates or school districts. If your property can't be insured, can't be rebuilt, or can't be financed, then what is it really worth? Alaska shows us what happens when that question is answered, brutally and quickly. If Halong had hit an urban area with millions of dollars in real estate per block, we'd be facing a multi-billion-dollar write-down across housing portfolios, REITs, and municipal bonds. So the next time you look at a map, don't just ask where the best deal is. Ask where the next Halong could hit. Because the US housing market isn't just about supply and demand anymore. It's about survivability. What comes next? The people of Kipnuk and Kwigillingok are still without homes, still waiting. Their story is a warning, because the next Halong might hit somewhere bigger, somewhere more connected, somewhere where trillions of dollars in real estate are sitting on fragile ground. If your property can't be insured, financed, rebuilt, or even lived in, is it still an asset? That's the real-time bomb. Stay alert. Stay informed. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who cares about the future of real estate. EstateScope is here to decode the headlines and help you make smarter, safer moves in a rapidly changing housing landscape.